Hello everybody, and a very big welcome to my crowded desk and my channel. I've been looking at comparisons lately, and we've looked at gouache versus watercolor as a substrate. And this time I thought what we would do is have a look at two paper sorts. So what I want to do is paint exactly the same thing on two different sorts of paper and use mixed media, of course, all my favorites, same on both, an absolute side-by-side comparison, and see what one paper offers that the other one doesn't, and vice versa. Before we get on to that, housekeeping, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and if you like what you see here, please consider joining my Patreon, where you'll see a whole lot more mixed media art in action. And of course, if you have the time, leave me a comment, because I try to answer all of them. I certainly try to respond to all of them, and it's really nice to hear your thoughts too. That's sort of how we keep community going, isn't it? So yeah, please do consider doing any one or indeed all of those. So as I said, I'm a mixed media artist, which means I throw absolutely everything at my work. Today we're going to use a bit of pan pastel, which I've got sitting on the sidelines here. We've got some gouache, I've got some watercolor, and then over the top of it all we're going to do other things with neo arts and colored pencils and all sorts. Now, let's firstly put it into context. I've got two sketchbooks here. You may notice that the covers have a slightly different texture. The one on the right here is my Hahnemuhle Nostalgia. It's a beautiful smooth paper, and as you can see from some of my work in it, there's prints in here, there's all sorts of stuff, watercolors, mixed media, the lot. It's a smooth color and a smooth paper, and it's absolutely fabulous for mixed media because you can get fine lines with it. This other one is a Hahnemuhle watercolor book, and oh gosh, I've got to finish that. I didn't realize I hadn't finished it. Well, there's something for the weekend. I haven't used this as much with mixed media because it has a different sort of texture. I've done a fair few birds in it, actually. That's one of my favorites, just colored pencil, Faber-Castell colored pencil. Not exactly mixed. It is mixed media because about 3 or 4 things I've used there. But, you know, it's not my go-to. My go-to is usually this sort of thing, landscapes and what have you. This has a little bit of texture, not masses. It's certainly not like a 300 GSM cold pressed paper. This one has a medium texture. I'm not sure if I hold it up if you can see it. When you'll see it is when we start with coloured pencils. Now, I've sketched a very basic seascape because at the moment we're in summer. It's about June. I think it's half past June now by the time you see this. We're in summer, so I thought sea. Why not the sea? Because I live a long way away from it, and actually the furthest away I've ever lived. As I said, I think the other day in something, can't remember what I said that in, but I do believe I did say it. Anyway, here we are. I'm going to paint the same thing on both of these pieces of paper, and then we can analyze what happens. So I'm going to start out with some phthalo blue tint pan pastel, and just onto the smooth paper first. It feels really nice to lay down. It's one of the best ways to make a sky. Honestly, if you've not tried it, this is the one for the wish list. And on the watercolor paper, also nice, actually. So sort of different colors can sometimes show up differently as well. But what I'm just doing, it won't be the same. My career as a forger is over before it began because I can't even copy my own stuff. Let's try some of this alarming blue just up the top a bit, because this is a new one. It's the ultramarine blue pan pastel that I'm actually using here. Sorry, rather rudely off camera. And I'm just trying to put a little bit more oomph into the sky up here at the top. You know how sometimes it goes. Bit of a mark there. It was obviously a little bit wet. This one too. Pan pastel applied like this and it's not done properly. So any proper pan pastel artists out there, please do not faint dead away. But when you do it like this, there's very little dust and it goes straight onto the paper, but it sticks to the paper better than it sticks to itself. So once the paper is covered, it doesn't sort of want to play nicely anymore. This is white. Again, I don't have a lot of room with the two sketchbooks here, so I'm just going to say my Patreons, of course, will get a list of what I've used, so they don't have to sit there with a pencil and paper. Just a little bit on here as well of white. Right, well, so far, apart from the two marks I've got on there, which will be turned into birds, you can bet on that. So far, it's about the same. They're both quite nice. I'm just putting some on the sea. I do that because even though I'm going to go over with other things, the sky is almost always reflected in any large body of water to a certain extent. I mean, the sky, it can be a slightly different colour, but quite often I will make the sea, I'll put some of this in the sea and then I'll cover it up later. To be honest, off the bat, the blue, you would think that a rougher paper would be sort of, for want of a better word, stickier. It's not necessarily. They're both about the same. If anything, the smoother paper has a slight advantage, and the pan pastel has made a better fist of that than it has the smoother paper, the rougher watercolor paper. So to be honest, I have never done a comparison like this. I know what I think is going to happen. In fact, there are certain times in this picture I know exactly what's going to happen because I've been at this for a long time. But an actual side-by-side comparison like this I haven't done, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I'm sure that most of the things that I think will happen because, like I said, I'm not new. Right, next thing now is to bring in some watercolor, and I quite like using watercolors. Now, what am I going to use? Use this nice green one maybe here. I quite like using watercolors for the actual background of a picture, so right in the background, because it's a nice, it's sort of like, it's a really fine and, can I say dainty, delicate would be a better word maybe. It's a delicate sort of medium. Just going to rub some of that line out there. I put a little, I always sort of sketch my things in with watercolor pencil, because then I've got an idea, if I sketch at all, I've got an idea then where everything can go, but I'm not bound to it. And if I change my mind for any reason, or when I paint over it, I can just take those marks out. Just putting a little bit, probably not quite that much, a little bit less would be better, of a brown watercolor here. Just to give that a little bit of interest, but we don't want too much because it's supposed to be in the background. So I'm just going to blot it a little bit. So I want it to stay in the background where it belongs. Watercolor is a more delicate medium. I tend to use gouache as I come forward to the absolute foreground, and that's where I'll put most of the layers. So the furthest point away is, of course, the sky. And we've got that down. So that's nothing more to be done apart from these marks here, which happen sometimes. Like if you get any water on your sketchbook page before you use the pan pastel, they'll make little marks like that. Mostly I just turn them into birds, or if there's a tree in the vicinity, I'll put a tree there. Obviously here with this, it's a little bit different. We don't have the access to trees this close to the sea. Well, I'm not in this one anyway. But that's finished. That's finished. Don't need to touch it anymore, which means that you don't layer over the top of your watercolor with all sorts of other things like markers and acrylic and more gouache and coloured pencils and whatever else you dig out of your toy box. You don't keep layering over the top of it. So, because it's a pity really to use such lovely watercolours and then cover them all up, is my point. So that's finished. I would also, and okay, so just as an analysis, again, even though this is watercolor paper and that's watercolor paint, I sort of prefer it on the smoother paper here because, yes, I've blotted it, and blotting it, what I did there was I've got a bit of kitchen towel, just kitchen paper here. It's a bit wet because I've been wiping my brush on it, and you just sort of down and up again, and just don't rub, because if you rub you can compromise the surface of the paper and make it peel, and once that happens it's basically game over. You've got to be very, very careful in that area from then on. If you're not really careful you'll go right through, because some of these papers, they feel robust but they're not. So just dab it. And it's a pretty subjective thing to do, because I might have dabbed slightly lighter on this side than this side, or I may have had less paint there to begin with. So it's not exactly the same, but just looking at it, it's all right. It's watercolor on watercolor paper, whereas this one it's a little bit more textured. So there's that. I would now go in also with some more watercolor, just a little bit here for the back here, and again get rid of that line if we possibly can. Now I've already put pan pastel down, we just ignore that because what we want is some sea. Now I've chosen to make this a little bit brighter. I think we might, as we go back here a bit, because it's a bit deeper, you see, we can pop a little bit of another colour back here just to give it some movement. And as it comes forward, some areas don't have to have any colour at all, and it can come right round here. Sometimes I might do this with gouache, sometimes with watercolour. This is just putting an initial sort of wash down, if you like. Wash would be a good word for it. And on the watercolour paper, exactly the same. Again, I'm trying very, very hard to have the same amount of paint on both, but it's very subjective, so making sure that I'm still on the camera, that's another thing. Go there. And remember, when you're putting your layers down, that wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers. So if you want things to work out the way you see other people doing mixed media, you would have to then dry this. Don't go back in, even though this is, I mean, it's not been hosed down. This is a bit wetter because all these granulated, this is a super granulating watercolor from Schminker. And the big rule with these is you have to give them water to swim in and enough room to do it. So this is going to granulate here. This is not quite so much. It will granulate and it probably will get there at some point, but this is going to be quicker because it's also got these little lumps and bumps to cling to. But we haven't hosed it down, so it's not going to take forever to dry. But if you go over the top now with more watercolor, you can end up with a mess. You can end up with pilling on the paper if you've got if you've got a dodgy sketchbook, can I say, because we've all had them. Dry it, because wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers. So to get those lovely crisp layers, allow each one to dry. Also, that is often a thing that people say to me, oh, I tried coloured pencil over watercolour or gouache and it didn't work. If it's not very dry, it won't work. It doesn't matter what you do or how. You can buy the most expensive things you can get your hands on. You can, a lot of people that I teach will say to me, which pencils did you use? And this is why I put a list up for my patrons of exactly what I've used. However, that's great and it's helpful. Trust me, it's helpful, because having to guess whether this same pencil is going to work like that one, that is no way to start out. But the biggest thing I can tell you, and sort of keep repeating it, honestly, if I ever get a tattoo, it'll be this, is let your layers dry, because then you can go over the top with just about everything, within reason, of course. If you don't, you just have a mess and it won't work, and the pencils won't work, and it's super frustrating, and you can tear the paper trying, especially if you get to the point where your temper just gives out. Guilty as charged. So I'm going to dry that and I'm going to come back to you. Right, all nice and dry. Now obviously I'm using one particular brand of paper here in these sketchbooks. It's Hanemühle, which is what I can get here in Germany, which is really beautiful paper. But really what we're looking at is a smooth paper versus a rough paper, and it doesn't really matter to an extent as long as they're good quality. This is extremely good quality paper. So as long as you've got a good quality paper, it doesn't matter. It's just the smoothness versus the roughness. Now, with this next layer, I've got a Caran d'Ache dark indigo pencil because, of course, being mixed media, I get to put a few other things in here. Just darken the horizon up a little bit, make sure that it's nice and straight, and just put a little bit of variation through the water. It doesn't have to be masses. And on the edge, I'm using the Caran d'Ache Neo Art 6901 in white, straight over the top of the edge of here, because I want to preserve some of those highlights and light areas. And who knows, I might decide to come back in and put something else in there. But if I go with the white here, this will act as a bit of a resist. Now, that went down quite smoothly. And even here, where we can put it on and go over it with the pastel, you can still do that and do all sorts of things with it, and it'll be quite smooth. Here, on the watercolor paper, it's going to be slightly different. It's more textured from the get-go, as you can see. It's basically like taking a rubbing when you're in primary school. You can rub over the surface and you'll get some sort of impression of it. It doesn't matter what I do here. This is going to be better texture than this. But if texture's not what you want, then the smooth paper is better. So again, I'll go with the Neo Art pastel round here to preserve these highlights in case we want to do anything else. And just for comparison, I can knock it back. That's the thing. But what I'm doing is, instead of getting pencil marks, what I'm doing is I'm burnishing it with the white pastel, which is then almost hiding it because of the thickness of the paper. And you get a third color, which is a mixture of the blue pencil and the white pastel. So it's becoming quite sort of purpley in color, which is fine because it's indigo and that can tend towards that. But in trying to get rid of the textures, it's just sort of building up. Now, that might be what you want, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it's not always what you want. So that's where there's a bit of a drawback to the rougher paper. And I think what we'll do here is we're going to pop, while I've got this pencil out, is we'll just pop a couple of wheeling seagulls in. These just have to be seagull shapes in different sizes, and here the ones here will be over a little bit further, but we'll do the same thing. Don't know what that one's doing, good grief. Maybe we put some together, that works sometimes. It lost its way, rather. That happens sometimes. Not everybody, even here in the magic of the internet, not everybody does every stroke perfectly. Right, some little dots in the background are always handy because, you know, it looks like then a flock coming in towards you. So that covers that mark up and gets rid of that. Right, so with this, I do usually go for a fairly loose style, and this is why I don't always use watercolor. It's because I tend to get carried away with the next layer and cover it up. What I can also do down here is I can get some gouache if I want to, and I can go over bits with that. Especially here, gouache is a bit stronger. I could have gone back with the watercolor again. I can just blend that with my finger very lightly, being very aware that if you rub when it's wet, you'll get pilling and can go through the paper. But this is the sort of thing I do, so I wanted to show you, because there's no point telling you about it and then not doing it. That's ridiculous. Again, this will take a bit more rubbing than the other one because it's really made for wet media. But you can sort of see how the white highlights are quite preserved and have made their own marks. And that's what I want. So yeah, I don't mind that. That can stay. Right, the next thing now is I would get rid of the watercolor at this point. You don't have to, but you can. And I would go in with a huge amount of different colours. I mean, not huge amounts, but, you know, different colours of gouache. And again, I'm going to just worry away at that line there. These are meant to be cliffy bits, so I don't want it to be too sort of even. But I've got these lines that I started with, which I can now get rid of, all of these light blue lines. It's just a regular watercolour pencil, but it's a top tip if you want to draw something and you're not sure and you want to be able to get rid of it, because don't forget, if you use normal graphite, like just a regular, what we used to call in school a lead pencil, you can't get rid of that easily. If you go over it with water, it'll set it. So I'm just going to come around here as well. Yeah, and that's when you're stuck with it. So you've got to be careful. Now my gouache is not very, it's not very wet at the moment because it's been sitting for a while. Normally I give it a bit of a wake up. Sometimes I don't. I just sort of plunge on in and hope for the best. Right, so just a few marks. Again, this is what I expect. I'm using the gouache so lightly that it could be argued that it's almost like a thick watercolour. So there's that. And then, like I said, it's not straight from the tube. I tend to use it a little bit like watercolour. And now I'm just adding some more interest to the green bit here. Small areas of a medium green. A little bit more around here. Doesn't matter if they run together a little bit. It's all about the texture, funny enough. I always thought that because I love texture so much, I thought, well, you know what's going to be brilliant is textured paper. You can't get any more texture than that. No, it's not great, because when you, it's all right during the painting stage, but when you go back in, trying to get this similar, it's not going to work. I may as well just give up at this point. Yeah, when you go back in with your coloured pencils, then it just all falls over. And I know that watercolourists have been using, and this is proper watercolourists, not people like myself, but proper watercolourists have been using all sorts of textured, finishing things like white gouache and dip pens and things like that. That's been going on for absolutely ever. But yeah, this is different sort of painting, what I'm doing now, so it just doesn't work as well. It does up to a point, and every single time I do it, I think, oh, this time is going to be different. It's going to work. No. Right, a couple of colours of browns now would be nice. And again, they're as dry. I mean, you want to see it. It's just, it's crumbly. Doesn't matter. That's the great thing about traditional gouache. And note that I said traditional gouache. I'm absolutely not meaning by that the acrylic gouache that we use. Not that at all. This is just regular traditional gouache paint. Go over the top of it to a certain extent where it's dry, but be aware that if you upset it, it'll go muddy. That doesn't worry me as a general rule. I'm quite okay with that. But, I mean, there's a limit to that too, of course. Right. And these marks that works. Then around the bottom of the cliff, I would go for quite a dark brown. Again, wake it up a little bit, maybe a little bit of black in that. You'll soon find out where you've put the neo colour because it won't let you go over it. As you can see there, it's beading. Just drag some of that back up, and here, where it beads, you can just rub it in a little bit and you'll get a different effect. Because these cliffs have got sort of caves and all sorts of stuff in them. So all the dark bits to the bottom. It's the main bit. I can feel that pilling. So you've got to know when to stop. If you don't, you'll soon learn for next time. Right, and onto the watercolor paper. Again, it feels so much different to put the paint on. And I can certainly do a bit more as far as rubbing is concerned, but as you can see there, the texture here where I've rubbed it, it's totally different. Right, around there. And off onto the edge a bit. What's going on here? I think we could probably, I should have put a little bit more of the Neo Art there. Well, the cliffs are going to be different on this one. That was absolutely to be expected. Right, and now it just remains to fill in some of the other areas that I've got here and get rid of the white. Right, so update so far, because we're at the drying stage again. Just wash my fingers because I will touch something that can't be washed with that and it'll go everywhere. Like I said, it's about texture still at this point. It's going to be texture most of the way, to be fair, because what we've got here is we've got a fine grain paper, smooth, and you can make pools of colour. You can do things. Like I said, this will granulate. It's not going to not granulate. It's just different. This one takes a lot more rubbing, but you won't get rid of those textures evenly. And now what's going to happen is we're going to dry this and then come back in and add some different things, like maybe some Neocolor too, plenty of coloured pencil. I'm thinking about a Tombow to make some sort of silhouetted plants and things like that, because I quite like those at the moment as well. Because at the moment this is a little bit too bright for my sort of liking. In fact, I think before we do anything, I would feel obliged to come in and knock some of this brightness out of it. It's just a bit too much. Certainly not my scene. Gosh, I love a bouncing piece of paper, and it happens, we're near the edge of the book as well, but it also happens when yeah, that's better. I know we've got to have sunlight on this and everything, but I'm never ever going to like muted colors. You're right. I'm never ever going to like neons. If you ever see me painting with neons, it's a cry for help. So send some sort of intervention. I know there's got to be some sunlight there, and we want the sunlight, but yeah, it's just way too bright. And here as well. Even the gouache wants to granulate a little bit on this, even though it's not strictly advertised under that heading, but there you go. Right, so just knock that back a bit. It's better. Much more to my taste. Right, I'm going to dry that off, and then we'll come back to you and we'll go in with some details. Basically, the way I do my mixed media, and I believe a lot of other people do it exactly the same way, is you start out with the big shapes. And I tend to work wet to dry, big shapes to details. So the big shapes are going to be the sky, the sea, the cliffy bits and rocks and things like that. And you get all these big areas happening. You're getting rid of the white page, to be fair. So you get all these big areas happening, and then you refine it down to the next stage. So the next stage now, we could argue that there's 2 layers on here already, since, you know, I've knocked back some of the light bits. But we start with just the blotchy colours. Now we're going to dry that again, because like I said, wet on wet blends, wet on dry layers. So we want to go in now with a medium that is not going to be friendly if this is wet. So sometimes you can go in, like for example, if you were to use Derwent Inktense over the top of this, it wouldn't matter very much. You'd have to be careful with the surface of the paper sometimes. You can also use Neocolor too that are water soluble, or any other similar water soluble thing, art graph and stuff like that. But I want to use coloured pencils next, so therefore I have to be aware that this has got to be dry. It's just easier. It's also less messy, and I'm the person who will put my hand in it and then get that everywhere. So I dry it and keep it nice and neat and tidy. So that's where I'm off to next. I shall return momentarily. Right, you could argue that here's where the fun begins. The first hilarious bit is my extremely long pencil. I'm determined to get everything I can out of this. I sharpened it to fit it into a pencil holder because it was a bit too thick, but it's not. It's just too small to sharpen now. Right, this is Caran d'Ache Green Ochre, and it's one of my favorites. I'm just going to put some at random up here. Again, it allows a bit of light without being too sort of gaudy. I also like the way you can glaze and pull these pieces together by going over it with the pencil. And it's no mistake at all that I started on this side, on the smooth paper, because I know what's going to happen. So it's not exactly a scientific and fair test. Right, so predictably on the smooth paper, the coloured pencil has just gone on perfectly well. You probably can't see it a lot. I'll hold it up for you in a second. Now on here, just the same as the water, if you want to do coloured pencil on this sort of paper, you've got to press harder. And then you can press the tooth of the paper down a bit. However, there is going to be a payoff there, as in you won't be able to put as many layers on because you're flattening the tooth of the paper right down. But it is possible. It's just, yeah, you're not going to get the fine detail. To be fair, this picture doesn't require a lot of fine detail, so you can still get away with it. So I guess the answer here is if you're really wanting the super granulation from the watercolors, you're better off with this and put up with it with the subsequent layers of media. But if you want fine details, then you go without the super granulation as much. It will still do it. You've got to put more pigment on and give it plenty of water, but it's a trade-off. It's basically a which hill do you want to die on, that sort of thing. Mars Black, believe it or not, it's not much longer than that, to be fair. This is Derwent Light Fast, and it's a fabulous pencil, and I'm going to use it to put some rocks in the water. Just the sort of random ones. I suspect that we're back in Cornwall again, and I can hear my Patreons groaning. Poor things. I really do feel sorry for them sometimes. Perhaps I should go back on the meds. It's just a matter of getting some colour in here, and again on this side it's going to be quite straightforward. You can't see a lot of what I'm doing, so you might be sitting there saying, the hell is she doing and why? What I am doing is down here, when you've got the paper and you put the gouache or the watercolor over the paper, the next layer that goes over the gouache or the watercolor is not on the paper anymore. It's on the gouache or the watercolor, because the gouache or the watercolor is in between you and the paper. If you want to get some special effects with textures, what I'm doing here is creating a resist using a pencil. So this means that the next thing I come back with, supposing it's a light pencil, what have we got? Let's suppose we were to come back with, not that one, say a brown ochre. It'll stick to the gaps in between what I've just done with the Mars Black. This will stick to the gaps, and you'll magically get little pops of texture here and there. Do you see what I mean? So although I'm going over the whole lot, it's not sticking there, for example. Here's none, there's no pencil, here's a bit, none, bit. So wherever I've not put the pencil, it's sticking to the gouache and making colour. Where I have put the pencil, it's not penetrating it. And that's how you can get quite a nice sort of random resist. Let's see what happens on here. I'll do much the same thing. What it's actually doing is rubbing some of that off, creating its own sort of pattern. And we need our rocks in the water here. Honestly, the Cornish coastline, it's treacherous. Lots of shipwrecks and famously sort of treacherous for sailors over the years and centuries. Back in here perhaps a little bit. It's a matter of trusting the process here, because I can't see what I'm doing, because this pencil is so very, very similar to the black and brown mix that I've used to create the bottom of the cliffs. And when I bring it up here, of course, I'm going to get texture. I guess this comes under the heading as you get what you get and you don't throw a fit about it, because you have to know your product. So you'll know that one paper is going to do one thing and one paper's not going to. It's going to do something else. But if you're new, that's why we're doing this. This is how you learn. You take somebody else's knowledge and they'll show you. And then you'll know, right, well, actually, I prefer what this looks like. I don't like that, or vice versa. I don't much care for this. It's too textured. I like these finer marks. And that's what we are doing this for. So I've gone around here at random. Now I'm going to come back with the lighter pencil, and it just doesn't stick to some areas, but you get this really lovely random effect that looks much more natural than if you'd sat down and contrived to do it perfectly. This works a lot better, and that's how I always do it. So dark pencil first, and furthermore, if you're still needing a bit more, you can come back in over the top, and the dark pencil will work quite well over the light one. A lot better than vice versa, as a rule. I never do anything in one area only. I always bring the pencil in somewhere else as well. Even if you don't see it very well, it's there, and yeah, it will register. So there's this. The next thing we can do is we can grab this is a Caran d'Ache Chrysocolla Blue Neo Art 6901. I just want to put some more oomph into this water. I want it to be just that little bit more turquoisey and knock some of the blue back there. So that sort of increases that. And on here it will do exactly the same thing. Now this is a wax and an oil pastel. Most are just, they're one or the other. They've managed to do both in this. I have heard it mentioned, not officially, but I have heard it mentioned that these may be the takeover from the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 1. Neocolor 1 are not water soluble, neither are these. So the Neocolor 2s are the water soluble ones, and there's not a huge range of colours in the Neocolor ones. There's only 40 colours, which, I mean, only, that's 40 colours. But there are, I don't know how many is in the Neocolor 2, but a great deal more than 40. So, yeah, I think these may be, depending on how the industry receives them, these are the new contesters to the throne. I've got another one here. I'm just adding some marks where I think they will do the most good. And along here. Now, bearing in mind, because these are wax and oil, they will create a resist over which you cannot go. And here too, so you get much more texture on this side. A little bit of burnishing of the colour and new colours being created. It's not too bad. This is really not too bad. I guess with this, what the take home is you've got to choose your weapons. So what you can do on one, you can't do on the other, but then again, you can't get the effects from one on the other either. So it depends what's important to you. It's as simple as that, really. It depends what is important. If it's very, very important to have fine texture, like, for example, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to grab one of these very fine acrylic paint markers and see if it's working first. For example, on here, does that work? It does work. And of course on here it works. So just to create a little bit of, I think a teasel is what we're going for here. Just a sort of a teasel shape, just making sure that I'm still on the actual camera. That'd be good, wouldn't it? So just a square sort of shape with some marks coming down like so. colour it in a little bit. Different levels is a good idea. Also put one in down here. I think they'd be better if they were darker, if I'm honest. It's going okay over the top of the Neo Art, which is, like I said, a wax and an oil mix. Right, let's have a look over here. The thing is, the other thing to take into consideration now is there are so many layers on this one. The marker's not that happy with it. There's so many layers on this one, we're no longer on the paper, as I explained before, and that does matter. Right, so simple wildflowers. And these have got little they're very spiky. People in Britain will know exactly what I'm talking about. Do let me know in the comments if you have teasels where you live, if they're known. I know the British Isles are mostly known for. I know Australia has them a little bit, but not quite as much. But yeah, they're kind of like little sort of hedgehogs on a stick, to be fair. They've got little spiky bits around them, which I'm going to add to as we go along. Just a bit of texture. I've got this one down here, which is entirely pointless since it's almost exactly the same colour as the background. Try and get the lid on the right way. That would also help, wouldn't it? I'm going to go in with a second colour, which is a little bit lighter, and just pop some lighter colours, or lighter marks onto the left-hand side. Normally in my pictures, everything, the light always comes in from the left-hand side, so I'm going to continue that, just to give them the texture they need. It's all rather fun, and adding things like this to your pictures can really give it context, even place, because of course I suspect that there are some places in the New England coast that look very similar to Cornwall, and vice versa. A bit on there. So that was onto the watercolor paper, which works quite well. It's fine enough. It's mainly coloured pencil that gives you the trouble, to be fair. But I thought the best way is, like I said, don't tell you about this, show you. Then we can talk about it at the end. This is easier to apply. I don't have to press as hard on the smooth paper to get the same effect. And because I'm after mainly a finer detail effect from time to time, sometimes I don't. I mean, I'm not falling for this everybody wants to loosen up malarkey, because I know a hell of a lot of people who don't. And details is nothing to be ashamed of by painting a little bit of detail into your work. That's not something that we need to hide and hope nobody ever finds out about it. Right, just to put some stemmy bits in. So that's not worked too badly on either one, but it's a lot easier on the smoother paper. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit bigger pencil, and I'm going to sharpen it, because putting in of some grasses is the next test, and I do that with my Derwent Light Fast Forest pencil. Keep your pencil fairly sharp, because at the moment we've got this in the middle of nowhere, which is, it's got no context, so I'm pushing the pencil here just to put some texture in. I'd prefer, I think for my money, I would prefer to create my own texture as I am now with the pencil than have it given to me and I've got to put up with what I get. And this is the thing with some coarser papers. Just come across here. There's going to get to a point there where nothing's going to work very much. Mind you, if anything does, it'll be this forest pencil, because it's quite good at going over most things, but it's not even up. Not even the forest pencil is up to some of these wax pastels. That's okay, we'll get some extra texture. Yeah, I would rather control this by creating my own texture than saying, right, well, you know, this is the texture that you're given, this is the paper, live with it. Because again, I did buy some of these books. I mean, I bought them because, like most people, I started off with watercolor as a child, actually. And I went on as a young adult doing watercolor, and it stayed with me for most of my adult life. It's only about 6 years that I've been doing mixed media work because I was just dissatisfied. I thought this is just always something wrong. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit here. I'm happy enough with that. You sort of get the idea. There's always something wrong. There's always something missing with just watercolor or just acrylic. And it wasn't until I discovered that mixed media was a thing, because when I was growing up, you would have, I don't know, you would rather somebody said something horrible about you in school, and you know how that hurt when it happened, than admit to being a mixed media artist when I went to school. It was quite parochial, I'm not going to lie. Just using the pencil on the side to get some more depth here into this bottom bit, because that's the texture we're after. And of course, towards the bottom of the grass, it's going to be a lot darker. Yeah, mixed media art wasn't a thing. How about you? I mean, I went to school in the 70s and 80s in Australia. Did anybody else have that particular... That's just not going to work. I always try. Did anybody else have that particular experience? Had you, if you went to school in a similar era, did you, I was in the country in South Australia as well, so you know, not much reached us down there. Get on with this too while I'm chatting. But yeah, it was just unheard of. Nobody, you would have been seen as some sort of renegade, I think, actually. You were one thing or the other. The teachers really tried to get us interested in oil painting and a bit of acrylic, and obviously with cheap, fairly cheap things. I mean, I went to a very good school. They shouldn't have been offering that. They should have been doing exactly what they were asked to do, I suspect, looking at the fees. But it just wasn't a thing. So during sort of the last 6 years, I've been gradually finding out more and more about it. And of course, now it's just taken hold. I can't imagine doing anything else anymore, to be honest. Right. Back to the topic at hand. But yeah, so if you let me know if you've always felt there was something missing as well. I know a few of you have said that before when I've mentioned it. Because, yeah, it's amazing to be able to say, right, well, you know, this is not working anymore, this particular medium, or I can't put any more of this down. Where can I go next? And have another option, rather than saying, well, you know, you chose oil painting and that's what an oil painting looks like. Get over it. I don't want that. I want to be able to say, well, you know, now I want to put some watercolour on top. Try that with oil painting and see how far you get. Right, so update of what I'm doing here. I'm pressing a lot harder to get the same marks as I got on there. This particular pencil is a particularly good one. Like I said, it's my Derwent Light Fast Forest, probably one of my favourite pencils in the world. And I'll hold this up so you can see it in a minute, because it's working reasonably well. I mean, I'm getting some effects, but they're not what I want, and it's not what I have on this other side. So just side by side, if I show you those, the one on the left, the watercolour paper, is a lot coarser than the one on the right. You just can't get the fine detail, and it's on this layer, this third layer, even though there might be about 11 layers on by the time you finish, but it's seen in 3 layers. So big shapes, refine those big shapes, detail those big shapes, are the 3 layers. And on this 3rd layer is where you really see the difference in the paper. So far we've been able to muddle by, and honestly from a distance you wouldn't really notice the difference. It's actually more for the person working on it who feels it than the person looking at it. But you can see, as I said, this is a lot coarser. There's just the detail just isn't there on this one, whereas on this one I can get the detail. With this absolutely beloved pencil, I can go over even the wax pastels. You can still see them through there, but it's not too bad, and it's all just adds to that lovely detail. Whereas on this one, that just to me looks a little bit too coarse. I'm not happy with it in the way I'm happy with this, that sort of thing. So how would we sum this whole experience up? As I've said a few times, and it's worth repeating again, you get what you get. Sadly, it's how it is. For example, if you're not into detail, so if you're a loose painter but you want to use mixed media, then by all means a paper with a bit of grain like a watercolor paper will work very well. However, if you like to put a lot of fine detail in with things like coloured pencils and so forth like that, you are better off with a finer paper. Having said that, if you want to bypass the coloured pencil stage, and very few people do, this is the thing, most people are ecstatic to rediscover coloured pencils in their adulthood and find out that it's a legitimate thing, so they really don't want to bypass them. But if you do, you could go for things like a dip pen with ink. That would help with this. Let me just grab one and I'll show you what I mean. So comes my set here, something quite fine, and I'm going to use, actually I'm not going to use that, I'm going to use this ink here that I've mixed myself from the darkest greens, darkest blue and brown. I'm not even sure if this will work in this pen because it's quite fine. So this one, of course, it's going to work brilliantly well, lovely and fine. What it's doing is all of that pastel is clogging up the nib, so that's not working brilliantly, so I won't go too far with that. I know that if I sit here and keep on unclogging the nib, it will work beautifully. And on this one, it's a lot better. So again, it's a sacrifice you might have to make. If you want to use watercolor for the watercolor properties, then consider bypassing the colored pencil. I'll show you what I mean when I've made a few marks here. Just waiting for it to clog up again. There we go. See, it's got a little bit of the neo art, so I've always got filthy fingers because it's simply the quickest way to unclog the nib, to be fair. I'll show you that. If you are happy to bypass the colored pencil phase, you can get some very fine effects, as watercolorists anywhere will tell you. You can get some very fine effects with a dip pen and nib. You can also use fine liners just like these. But with these, although the delivery system is a lot easier to use, it's actually boring because you can only get the colours they want you to have. Whereas if you get some acrylic ink or some drawing ink and other things like that, you can get a myriad of colours and it's much, much easier. So coloured pencils, if we boil it down to one thing as to what is wrong with this paper, it's the coloured pencils. And to a certain extent also the pastels that we go over the top with. You can get some lovely textures, especially on rocks and buildings though, so there's that trade-off. Whereas, yeah, that's the biggest thing, is the coloured pencils aren't as fine, they're coarser. So if that doesn't bother you, this is great. This is great. If it does bother you, consider going without the coloured pencils and using ink and dip pen instead, and you can still get some lovely fine effects. So to be honest, at the end of the day, the observer wouldn't see too much difference between the two, but the artist will. You'll notice it. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you think. Does it bother you to, would it, see, it would really bug me eventually to have to go without a whole category of fun tools, because I love my coloured pencils. It'd really bug me eventually that I was going without. That would bother me, which is really stupid. You would think I'd grow up eventually, but apparently not. Whereas, yeah, you can do things with other things. So if it doesn't bother you, either one is good. I recommend both of these. Of course, and using the word coarse in both its sort of incantations, if we had 300 GSM cold pressed, really coarse wallpaper, I want to say, happened to be looking at the wall when I said it, watercolor paper, you won't get half this sort of effect. It's almost worth doing this painting a third time to show you, because the coarser the paper, it's just really, it becomes very, very difficult. It's not impossible. And like I said, you've got to pick your battles. So you'll choose what sort of thing you want to use because you've decided on that paper. Or if you've got some, I know a lot of people have bought paper and think, well, now what am I going to do? I really like this mixed media thing, but I've got all this watercolor paper thinking that was the best. I fell into that trap as well because I love the texture. I thought, well, hey, let's pile the texture on. We'll have texture on the paper, texture in the materials. No, there's a trade-off. Anyway, do tell me what you think. I'm still team smooth in a lot of ways because, like I said, this one is just coarser in places. In a way, I don't want it to be coarse. I can fake this texture on the smooth, but I can't take it away on the rough. I can't choose. Excuse me. And to get that, I've got to really, really press quite hard with my pencils, and of course they can break. So I would rather choose. So for me, it's team smooth. Tell me what you are in the comments, team smooth or team rough. It's interesting to know. And yeah, thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and do consider joining my Patreon. Lots more stuff like this, really getting into mixed media. Very much teaching, not just demonstrating with, sped up with the music on, teaching. And yeah, it's a really nice way to learn art. So I shall see you next time, and take care, and I hope you get some painting in. Bye for now. Bye.